Welcome, traveler, to another cozy pixel adventure. Before we begin, a small note for those joining us for the first time. This story is the third arc in a longer journey following Nira, Aerin, and their strange little companion Flake through a snowy world that listens, remembers, and sometimes responds. If you haven't heard the first two tales yet, the frozen lake and the story that followed it, you might enjoy starting there. The links are waiting in the description, ready whenever you are. If stories like this help you slow down, feel safe, or drift a little closer to sleep, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe. More quiet adventures are always on the way. For now, get comfortable. Pull a blanket a little closer. Maybe imagine a warm cup of hot cocoa in your hands, steam curling softly into the air. The day is still unfolding, so let's return to the snow. Midday light lay gently across the snow, pale and steady, as if it had decided to stay a while. The sky was wide and quiet, a soft wash of winter blue that didn't press down or threaten to change. Snow stretched in every direction, shaped into long, shallow waves by old winds that had already moved on. Nira and Aerin were already walking. Their footprints trailed behind them in a loose, meandering line that curved and doubled when the ground invited it. Their pace was easy, unforced, the kind that came from knowing how a long day could really be. Flake bounded ahead of them, then vanished into a drift. Aerin didn't even look up. "Give it back," she said mildly. A moment later, Flake popped out of the snow, a few steps to the left, ears uneven, eyes bright. One of Aerin's gloves dangled from his mouth. He paused, clearly considering whether to run. Nira watched him with a small smile. "He's thinking about it." Flake made his decision and bolted. Aerin sighed, though her mouth twitched. Every time. She followed, boots crunching softly through the snow. Flake darted ahead, zigzagging with exaggerated care, as if he wanted to be caught, but not quite yet. When Aerin got close enough to grab him, he dropped the glove neatly at her feet and hopped backward, pleased with himself. She picked it up and dusted it off. "One day," she said, "you're going to steal something important." Flake tilted his head, bent ear flopping, and then dug briefly at the snow beside him. He uncovered nothing at all and seemed satisfied. Nira caught up, breath calm, eyes wandering across the open landscape. The snow out there was clean and untouched, except for their path and a few faint marks left by small animals who had passed through earlier in the day. Everything felt settled, like the world had already finished whatever it needed to do. She liked days like this. They moved on, the rhythm of their steps matching without effort. Aerin walked slightly ahead, as she usually did, boots testing the ground before committing to each stretch. She had a way of reading the snow, noticing where it thinned or packed down, where it would hold and where it might slide. Nira followed, not because she had to, but because she enjoyed watching how Aerin moved. There was confidence there, not loud or showy, just steady. Aerin trusted her feet, trusted her sense of direction. Flake wove between them, occasionally stopping to sniff at something invisible, then darting off again. The snowfield rose gently ahead, a long slope that caught the light just right. At its crest, far in the distance, A faint line cuts across the horizon. Nira's gaze lingered there longer than she meant to. She frowned slightly, not in concern, but in thought. The shape felt familiar, not in any way she could explain. It wasn't remarkable, it was just a ridge, dusted with snow like everything else. And yet, something about it settled into her chest with a quiet sense of recognition. She didn't say anything. Flake stopped abruptly and stared in the same direction. Aerin noticed that. She slowed, glancing between Nira and the horizon. "What?" she asked. Nira blinked and shook her head. "Nothing. Just thinking." Aerin hummed, unconvinced, but didn't press. She rarely did. Instead, she pointed ahead, where the snowfield dipped slightly to one side. "We can go straight across," she said, "or take the long way around through those drifts." Nira followed her gesture. The straight path was wide and open, smooth snow stretching unbroken to the far side. The curved route wound through a series of low rises and shallow dips, where stone peeked through the snow in places, creating gentle obstacles. Before either of them could decide, Flake took off toward the curved path at full speed. Aerin stared after him. Of course he did. Nira laughed quietly. He likes the scenery. He likes causing trouble. Aerin sighed and turned toward the longer route. "Come on, let's see where he's going this time." They followed, boots crunching softly as the terrain shifted beneath them. The snow here sounded different, slightly firmer, as if it had settled longer ago. Stone edges peeked through in places, rounded and worn, their surfaces dusted with white. Flake hopped from one to another, stopping occasionally to dig, then moving on without explanation. Aerin shook her head. He's not even looking for anything. Nira watched Flake's path more closely now. Maybe he is, just not something we can see. Aerin glanced back at her. "You always say that, and I'm usually right." Aerin laughed, breath puffing in a soft cloud. "You notice things because you stop moving." Nira smiled. "You notice things because you never do." They shared a look, warm and familiar. The path curved gently, guiding them around a shallow basin where the snow lay smoother and deeper. Sound felt muted here, as if the land itself was listening. Nira slowed, drawn to the way the light softened as it touched the surface. She knelt briefly, brushing her glove across the snow. It was fine and dry, slipping easily between her fingers. Aerin waited without comment, scanning the area out of habit. After a moment, Nira stood again. "I almost stayed behind this season," she said, as if continuing a thought she'd been holding for a while. Aerin raised an eyebrow. "You? Staying behind?" Nira shrugged. "I thought about it. There were things I wanted to finish. Notes, sketches, a few old records I hadn't copied yet. And then you didn't." Nira looked ahead, where Flake was now perched atop a small drift, surveying the world with exaggerated seriousness. "No," she said, "I didn't." Aerin nodded slowly. "I don't think I know how to stop. I only know how to slow down." "That's something," Nira said. Aerin grinned. Is it? It is to me. They continued, the ridge slipping briefly out of sight as the land folded around them. When it came back into view, it looked slightly different. The angle shifted just enough to feel new. Flake paused again, ears twitching. He sat still for a long moment, facing upslope. Aerin noticed this time. He's been doing that a lot. Doing what? Nira asked. Stopping, like that. Like he's listening. Flake chose that moment to dive headfirst into the snow, vanishing completely. Aerin snorted. Or he's just weird. Nira smiled, but her eyes lingered where he'd been sitting. They reached the edge of the basin and climbed a gentle rise. From there, the view opened wide again. Snowfields stretched far into the distance, broken only by the faint suggestion of terrain beneath. The ridge lay ahead, still distant, still quiet. Nira felt that familiar pull again. It feels like we've been here before, she said softly. Aerin tilted her head. Here? Or like this? Like this? Aerin considered that. Maybe we just like places that feel unfinished? Nira laughed. That might be true. Flake popped back up, snow dusting his face. He shook himself vigorously, then hopped over to Nira and tugged lightly at the edge of her scarf. She sighed. No. He tugged again. She laughed and adjusted it herself. You're relentless. Flake preened. They rested there for a while, not because they were tired, but because the day allowed it. The light stayed steady. The air stayed calm. Nothing pushed them forward. Eventually, Aerin stood and stretched. We should keep moving. Nira nodded. She took one last look at the ridge, then followed. They walked on, leaving only their footprints behind. The day did not hurry them, and neither did the world. The land shifted gently as they moved forward, not in any way that demanded attention, but enough to reward it. The snow grew thinner in places, revealing patches of ice that caught the light differently. In others, it lay deeper, sound softening, each step landing with a hushed compression that felt almost like stepping into a memory. The air stayed calm, predictable, the kind of winter weather that made it easy to forget how large the world really was. Flake noticed anyway. He slowed before they reached the frozen stream, stopping so abruptly that Aerin nearly walked into him. He stared down at the pale ribbon of ice, ears tilted forward, nose twitching. What? Aerin asked, peering past him. It's just a stream. Flake hopped once, then twice, then crossed in a neat arc that avoided the thinnest section without hesitation. Aerin followed more carefully, tapping the ice with her boot. Huh. On the far side, Flake sat and waited, smug in the only way a creature with no responsibility could be. Nira crossed last. She hadn't tested the ice at all. She'd watched Flake's feet instead. That's the third time today, Aerin said as they moved on. Nira glanced up. Third time for what? He stops before the ground changes, like he knows. Nira didn't answer immediately. She was busy watching how the snow gathered along the edges of the stream, how it curved inward in repeating arcs. When she did speak, her voice was thoughtful. "He's always been like that." Aerin snorted. "He steals my things." "That too." They walked on, the terrain folding subtly around them. A shallow hollow dampened sound so thoroughly that even their breathing felt loud. Beyond it, a low rise exposed them again to the open sky, wind brushing the surface of the snow with long, slow strokes. Flake paused at the edge of the hollow, then circled it, tracing the curve instead of crossing straight through. Aerin shook her head. "You could at least pretend to be normal?" Flake ignored her. Nira watched him with narrowed eyes now, curiosity replacing amusement. She had known Flake longer than Aerin had, though neither of them remembered exactly when he started following them. He had simply appeared one winter, small and persistent, as if he had always been part of their path and was only now being acknowledged. They hadn't questioned it. They rarely questioned things that stayed. The hollow opened into a stretch of gently rising ground where stone began to show through the snow more frequently. Round shapes, half buried, arranged in a way that felt accidental at first glance. Flake bounded ahead, then stopped short. He didn't dig this time. He just stared. Nira slowed, heart giving a small, unfamiliar tug. "Wait." Aerin stopped beside her. "What is it?" "I don't know yet." They approached together. The stones sat in a loose grouping, balanced in a way that felt deliberate once you stood close enough to see it. Each stone leaned slightly toward the next, forming a shallow arc that mirrored the slope of the land. Nira crouched, breath slow, eyes scanning spacing and angle. "This isn't random." Aerin knelt beside her. "You say that a lot, and I'm still usually right." Before either of them could say more, Flake hopped forward and nudged one of the stones with his nose. It rolled, just slightly, settling into a new position. Aerin groaned. "Hey, come on." Flake hopped back and sat calm and composed, as if he'd done exactly what he meant to do. Nira stared at the altered arrangement, pulse quickening. The light shifted. The shadow cast by the stones stretched differently now, aligning with the shallow curve of the land and pointing upslope toward the distant ridge. Aerin went still. "Oh," she said quietly. Nira swallowed. "He's not interrupting things." Aerin looked at Flake, then back at the stones. "He's finishing them." Flake flicked one bent ear and promptly stole the loose end of Aerin's sleeve tie. She sighed. "Of course you did." They sat there for a while, letting the moment settle without forcing it. The world didn't react further. It didn't need to. Eventually, Aerin leaned back on her hands. "This is getting hard to ignore." Nira nodded. "That's usually how patterns work." Aerin glanced at her sideways. "You always talk like that." Nira smiled faintly. "That's why you didn't leave me behind." Aerin considered that. "That's not why." "Why then?" Aerin shrugged. "You noticed the same things that I did." Nira's chest warmed at that. She remembered that day clearly now, more than she usually allowed herself to. The outpost had been nearly empty, snow pressing quietly against the walls. Most people had already moved on, chasing better routes or warmer ground. She had stayed behind, copying old markings from a support beam, fingers numb, breath fogging the air. Aerin had lingered too, tracing paths in the snow outside, boots scuffing patterns that only made sense to her. They had noticed each other noticing. It hadn't felt like meeting someone new. It had felt like aligning. "You asked me if I was waiting for something," Nira said softly. Aerin smiled. "And you said yes." "I still am." They stood, brushing snow from their clothes, and continued on. The ridge grew larger as the day wore on, its line sharpening across the sky. Flake stayed closer now, no longer darting far ahead. He walked between them, occasionally stopping to check the ground, and then moving on once satisfied. Aerin watched him with a thoughtful frown. "Do you think he knows where he's going?" Nira shook her head. "I think he knows when we're close." The idea settled between them. They stopped once more before the final ascent, resting near a low drift that blocked the wind just enough to feel cozy. The light had shifted toward late afternoon now, though the day still felt generous. Flake sat facing the ridge and didn't move. Aerin followed his gaze. "Whatever's up there," she said quietly, "it's been patient." Nira nodded. "So have we." They rose together and began the climb. The ridge waited. The climb felt less like effort and more like approach. The slope rose steadily, snow thinning in places where stone pressed close beneath the surface. Each step carried a soft crunch, familiar and grounding. The air stayed calm, almost careful, as if the weather itself had decided not to interfere. Flake moved ahead of them now, but not far. He didn't dart or double back. He followed a clear line, weaving just slightly, as though correcting for something invisible. Aerin watched his path with a thoughtful squint. "He's never this focused." Nira nodded. "He's been waiting." "For what?" "For us to catch up." That answer surprised them both. Aerin laughed under her breath, not because it was funny, but because it felt right in a way she hadn't expected. They climbed in companionable silence for a while. The ridge loomed larger with each step, its presence no longer subtle. It wasn't imposing exactly. It felt attentive. When they reached the top, the world opened. Snowfields spread outward in broad, gentle sweeps, the land rolling away until distance softened everything into pale blues and whites. The frozen lake lay far below, catching the light like a held breath. The valley beyond faded into mist, edges blurred, as though the world had decided not to be too specific today. They stopped without meaning to. Aerin exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "Yeah, this was worth the walk." Flake hopped up onto a low rise of stone near the ridge's spine and sat. He didn't move. Nira stepped closer, heart steady but alert. The snow here lay thinner, brushed aside by old winds. Beneath it, the stone was carved. The markings weren't deep. They didn't shout for attention. Curves dipped and rose, tightened and loosened. Some lines felt ancient, softened by time. Others looked almost new, as if they'd been waiting under the snow for the right eyes. Nira crouched, hands resting on her knees. She didn't touch the stone. She didn't need to. "These aren't symbols," she said quietly. "They're sequences." Aerin knelt beside her. "Of what?" Nira closed her eyes for a moment, letting memory and intuition overlap. "I studied record systems once," she said. "From cultures that didn't write the way others did. They tracked events, time, movement, using spacing, knots, tension, and placement." She opened her eyes again. "This isn't the same. Different hands, different purpose." "But," Aerin prompted, "but the idea is familiar." Flake shifted slightly, that bent ear angling forward. Nira's gaze followed the carvings, tracing how they converged beneath him. "This place isn't telling a story. It's guiding one." Aerin frowned. "Guiding who?" Before Nira could answer, the light changed. The sky thinned as if a veil had been drawn just a little aside. Shadows stretched across the ridge, aligning perfectly with the carved lines. Each groove gathered a faint glow, like moonlight resting on snow before night fully arrived. The ridge hummed, not a sound, but a sensation, a deep, steady awareness that settled into their chests and stayed. Nira's breath caught. "Oh," she whispered, "it's been calling." Aerin turned to her, eyes wide but calm. "Calling how?" Nira looked at Flake. "Through him," she said. "Through the places we stopped. Through the moments we didn't rush past." Flake's bent ear twitched, and for a moment, its curve mirrored one of the carvings beneath him. Not exactly, but just enough to notice. Aerin swallowed. "You think he's part of this?" Nira shook her head slowly. "I think he's tuned to it, the way some animals sense storms before clouds form." She laughed softly, a sound edged with awe. "He's not smarter than us. He's earlier." The glow spread outward. Far across the snowfields, something answered. A shimmer, subtle, then another, barely visible at the horizon. The sky shifted again, broader this time, like a deep breath taken by the world itself. Aerin started counting under her breath, then stopped when she realized it didn't matter. "This isn't just here," she said. Nira nodded. "This was one of the early places." Understanding settled over her, complete and gentle. The lake had softened them. The stone had taught them how to respond. The ridge had brought them to the moment they were ready to understand why. Not because they were chosen, because they had been paying attention. Flake hopped down from the stone and padded over to Nira. He bumped her leg once, deliberate and calm. Then, because he was still himself, he stole the loose strap from Aerin's pack and bounded away. Aerin laughed, the sound warm and grounding. So, he understands the shape of the world, but he's still a menace. Nira smiled. Some instincts don't need fixing. They stayed there as the glow faded back into the stone and snow. The ridge settled. The sky relaxed. Nothing felt finished, but everything felt aligned. Later, as the light softened toward evening, they made their way back down. The ridge didn't follow them with expectation. It had done what it needed to do. The path down felt easier than the climb. Snow folded under their boots in a familiar rhythm. The air carried the faint scent of cold stone and pine, clean and steady. Flake moved between them now, occasionally darting ahead, then circling back, as if checking that the shape of the group stayed intact. He stole nothing this time. They walked for a while, before either of them spoke. Aerin broke the silence first. Do you remember the first winter after we left the outpost? Nira smiled faintly. The one where everything went wrong? The one where we thought we knew what we were doing? They shared a quiet laugh. They had built their first shelter way too close to the slope. Snow had drifted higher than expected overnight, pressing against the walls, bending the door just enough that it wouldn't open cleanly in the morning. They had spent hours digging it free, hands aching, breath fogging the air in between them. Neither of them had complained. Neither had suggested leaving. That had been the first clue. I remember thinking, Aerin continued, that most people would have turned back then. Nira nodded. I remember thinking I didn't want to. They hadn't said it out loud at the time. Some understandings worked better when they were allowed to stay unspoken until they proved themselves. The sky dimmed another shade as they descended, clouds thinning into long, soft streaks. The light felt wide here, stretched gently across the snowfields. The world seemed larger than it had that morning, not because anything new appeared, but because something inside them had shifted its scale. Nira glanced back once. The ridge stood quiet now, its carvings hidden beneath the snow and shadow. From this distance, it looked ordinary, just another rise of stone among many. She liked that. What do you think it wanted? Aerin asked, not turning around. Nira considered the question carefully. I don't think it wanted anything, she said. I think it responds, like the lake did, like the stone did. To what? To attention, Nira said. To patience. To people who stay long enough to notice patterns instead of just landmarks. Aerin hummed thoughtfully. So we didn't wake it up. No, Nira agreed. We arrived at the right moment. They reached the lower snowfields as the afternoon softened toward evening. The light grew honeyed at the edges, reflecting off the frozen lake below. From here, its surface looked smoother than it had earlier, less like ice and more like a held sky. Flake bounded ahead, then stopped at the crest of a small drift. He sat back on his haunches and stared toward the lake, ears angled unevenly. Aerin followed his gaze. "You think he knew about all of it?" Nira smiled. "I think he feels the world as a series of invitations." Flake sneezed, then shook his head so hard his bent ear flopped twice. "Still dramatic," Aerin said fondly. They set up camp as the light began to thin, choosing a spot sheltered by low stone and gentle rises in the snow. The motions came easily, blocks placed, a small fire settled into itself. A pot warmed slowly above the flames. Steam rose, quiet and steady. The warmth spread in careful layers, first to their hands, then deeper, easing the long day out of their muscles. The fire crackled softly, not demanding attention, just keeping them company. They sat close, not touching, but aware of each other that, in a way, comes from long familiarity. The kind that doesn't need confirmation. Nira watched the flames reflect in the polished surface of her cup. The glow reminded her of the carvings, of the way light had traveled along stone, as if following memory instead of grooves. "Do you think it's happening elsewhere?" Aerin asked quietly. "Yes," Nira said without hesitation. "I think it already has." She pictured distant ridges, forgotten stones, frozen places where time had been waiting for remarkable patience, not for heroes, not for crowds, just for alignment. Aerin leaned back slightly, looking up at the darkening sky. "Feels strange, knowing we were part of something so big." Nira considered that. "Feels stranger knowing we didn't have to be anything else to reach it." The fire settled lower. Snow reflected the growing dusk, the world shifting toward its nighttime palette of blues and silvers. Flake curled into a loose spiral near the warmth, paws tucked beneath him. He sighed, deeply content, then stretched one ear, crooked as ever. Nira felt the day settle into her bones. The ridge had not changed their path. It had clarified it. They didn't need to chase answers for now. The world had shown them that meaning didn't always come fully formed. Sometimes it revealed itself like snowfall, layer by quiet layer, only visible once enough time had passed. Aerin stood and brushed snow from her gloves. "Tomorrow," she said, not as a plan, just as a gentle acknowledgement of time continuing. Nira nodded. "Tomorrow." They finished their cocoa slowly, letting the warmth linger. The fire dimmed to embers. The stars began to appear, one by one. Somewhere beyond sight, other places were listening. Here, in the small pocket of snow and stone, two travelers rested, changed in ways they didn't need to name, closer in ways that didn't require words. The world breathed, and they breathed with it.